Hey, so when I was in tech, I actually greenlit stolen artwork to be sent out in a marketing email to our customers. If that sounds vaguely familiar, and then you've probably been paying attention to Bungie, the latest gaming news around Bungie and their somewhat maligned extraction shooter Marathon. Marathon just finished its closed alpha, and the reaction wasn't great. People didn't love Marathon. Not everyone did. Some people did, but most people, didn't. But one thing they did love was the art on it, and kind of like the art direction for the people that are into that kind of futuristic modernist view. It actually worked really well. People enjoyed the aesthetic of it. Unfortunately, it came to light shortly afterwards that some of the critical and fundamental foundational assets used to create the aesthetic were actually stolen from an artist named Anti-Real. And this artist discovered her artwork in the alpha, either playing or watching, and I'm not sure. But she looked and was like, hey, that looks like my stuff. And she posted links to her portfolio that had been online since 2017, in which I believe was commercially available for lease and or purchase. And she identified lots of assets that were either exact copies or very similar to what she had done, scattered all over all over the Marathon alpha and the footage. And it after a day or so, and a lot of people did digging, they did comparisons, and sure enough, it looked very, very similar. And Bungie actually released a comment on it and said in a statement on social media, this is off Tom Henderson's blog, Insider Gaming. We immediately investigated a concern regarding unauthorized use of artist decals in Marathon and confirmed that a former Bungie artist included these in a texture sheet that was ultimately used in game. The issue was unknown to our existing art team, and we are still reviewing how this oversight occurred. We take matters like this very seriously. We reach out to the artist to discuss and committed to doing right by it. And then they don't do this. They go on to say they don't do this on purpose, and they're gonna take it out or fix it or whatever they're gonna do. Probably cancel the game at this point, to be honest. However, that's really not the point. The point is, how on earth could this happen? Well, as I said at the top of the piece, I greenlit stolen artwork to go live in a blog post to our customers at this one point when I was in tech. And it was wholly embarrassing, also wholly not my fault. And let me tell you what happened without breaking any NDAs that I may or may not still be under. I don't know. But what happened was this marketing person we have pools of assets that they can pull from. And as she said it, and I don't have any reason to discount this, right? But as she said it, she was in the wrong folder looking at these art pieces that were compiled in there as reference pieces, not to be used, just kind of ideas. And she grabbed one thinking that she was in the pool of licensed art, right? So licensed photographs, licensed artworks that we can use with credit. And this was not part of that. So she pulled it, used it, gave credit where it's due, however, did not have permission to do so. And then what happens is she puts this she puts this segment of it together. Her job in this was to take our marketing blog or our next marketing post, an email post, I think it was. And she was to outline it and fill the content, surround the content with relevant pieces of art and photographs and things that made it interesting to read. And so she did this, and nobody else's job but hers was to verify that every single art asset in that it came from the right pool, because the assumption is that she's pulling it from the right place. She knows better, right? That was the point. And so what ended up happening was we sent this out. It went through marketing. Marketing approved it because everything looked right. It was credited properly. It went across my desk. I checked it, make sure it didn't crash, make sure all the links work, sent it, greenlit it straight to production. It went out like a couple of days later, didn't think anything of it until the next week when the artist who was mentioned, who was quoted in it. So it was like, he got an alert that, hey, someone mentioned you in this. And sure enough, he had not authorized the use of it. He was very unhappy. And it did damage to our brand, to our company, because here we are stealing people's art. and passing it off as something that we, allegedly have license to, and which took, email multiple messages similar to the one that Bungie put out to kind of repair the damage. And we made right by the artist, and we did right by him. So I don't tell this story for the purpose of excusing Bungie. I tell the story to kind of shed some light on how this sort of thing could happen, because we've seen this happen before. Activision had a skin last year or the year before that was a flagrant ripoff. Bungie has actually been through this multiple times, and it seems like even GTA 6 had a similar issue where they used likenesses of different personas that were kind of quasi infamous on the internet, and those people, also were upset and were looking for credit or money / definitely looking for money, and so I think what's important to keep in mind is understanding how this stuff works, right? So most companies aren't going to have some, a team or people that are dedicated to somehow scour the whole of the internet and look for everything that resembles any given piece of art and then try and decide if it's copyright infringement or not, if it's stolen or not, right? There just isn't enough time, money, or people available in companies, especially companies that are pushing this stuff forward, that are constant. There's new art every single day, usually 10, 15 times a day. There's something to approve, there's something to sign off on. And there has to be an implicit trust that the artists themselves, the people themselves, whose job it is to create this stuff, are doing so honestly. And it's not always the case. And so they could produce Bungie probably has 150 to 200,000 individual pieces of art in Marathon, and Marathon doesn't have a lot going to it, right? Everything from color shades to textures to to decals to all of the aesthetic, right? Every little thing is going to be some piece of art. They're pulling, they're creating some art in house. They're pulling art from owned assets and stuff like that, and they're just going to do a lot to create the amount of art assets they need to put a game together. So in this sort of case, it would be extremely difficult to check every single thing. And then you look at the timeline that they give, where they said it happened in 2020. And then that individual's no longer with the company, so you can't even ask them, hey, do that. So in situations like this, and I've been in multiple companies where a major artist, somebody, graphic artist, a designer, somebody leaves, right? And they basically leave a hard drive of everything they've done and everything they're working on. They just if they leave voluntarily, right, they'll usually button things up and everything's nice and arrayed and it's clean, and we can look at the files and we know what's what. Sometimes they're asked to leave suddenly. And in those cases, their data is often a mess. And so somebody else will have to come in, sift through it, see what's good, see what's not. And in those sort of situations, this is the kind of cracks that stuff can fall through, which is probably what happened here. I don't necessarily believe off the top of my head that Bungie would look around and go, let's just steal this person's work and build our brand around it. Likely this artist stole it, presented it as theirs, said, I created this. And then everybody looked at it and said, oh, cool, that looks good. We like that. And let's move forward with it. And that, from the time it was created to the time they decided to move forward with a lot of those assets, I mean, there could be years, right? There could be 2-3 years go by, completely different managers, completely different departments, right? They could have had a lot of turnover in the roles that would check this. And so the people getting these files would have no reason to believe that they haven't been vetted, they haven't been checked, there isn't some sort of system in place that verified that this was legit. And that's just the way business works, okay? People leave for one reason or another. Everything that they created is property of the company. It goes into a pool. People will go through it. They'll figure out what they need, what they don't. And then they kind of go forward from there. And so in the case of an artist, so if they stole stuff, right, in this case, and this is the one that we caught, who knows if this person was just intellectually bankrupt and just coming up with, stealing stuff to keep their job versus actually being a good artist who can create things. And we don't know what that story is, right? We don't know who this artist was. Is Bungie lying through their teeth? It could be. They could be, right? We don't know. But given my experience, what I think is the most likely, this is what I believe to be probably the most likely scenario, because I've been through this scenario. And I've been through this scenario where the mistakes get all the way through to production, and then we have to deal with the consequences. So what we did internally is we basically went through the entire catalog, re-verified that we had authority to use, we had the rights to use everything in our catalog. We actually found a few things that the artist didn't want anymore, or didn't want us to use anymore, so we took those out. And then everything kind of got like verified, right? So there was like a 2-stage process then, where you pulled it, and then there was like a database where we checked the file name against the database, and sure enough, it was in the database, it checked out, and you could ship it. If it didn't show up in the database, then there was a problem, because that came from somewhere else. And then there was a process to figure out, where did you get this? Where did you make it? Is it yours? How did it come by? How did you come by it? And can we use it? Okay. I suspect Bungie, and hopefully some of these other, AAA studios, start implementing an AI sort of thing, where it just kind of like when an artist creates assets and they submit it into a system, the system then just starts scouring publicly available images looking for matches. And when it finds matches, it flags it for review, and then someone can go through and review it. That's the sort of system that would actually prevent this from happening. Well, it won't prevent it, but it will reduce it from happening. When these things come up, it's really easy to nail Bungie to the wall and say, hey, you, the company, the studio, stole this person's artwork. And it may be true. We don't know. We may never know, right? They have scapegoated somebody. They won't say who. And their story might also be true. My point here is that while both of these things can happen, the former, the individual making the mistake or making the mistake or being intentionally dishonest, that is probably where the theft started, and the problems then that snowball from that stem from a high trust at the individual level, and not a lot of double checking, and no system in place to verify that the art is unique. So that's what I got for you on the topic. That's what I have today. Let me know in the comments what you think. Smash the like, that's a stupid phrase. I hate that phrase. Just hit the like and subscribe button. It helps me in the algorithm. If you really disagree or you want to know more, please drop a question in the comments below. Let me know what you think there, and I will catch you on the next one.